I'm just going to do a quick intro and then we're going to kind of jump into the topics. How are you? How are you doing
I'm
overall?
good.
Yeah.
I'm good. Yeah, life is busy,
Yeah.
but it's not too bad. So,
Cool. And we'll talk all about that stuff. Hey guys, welcome to Into the Industry. Today I am so excited because we are talking to one of my very good friends and someone I admire and look up to very much. We're going to talk to Dr. Carly Brue. And Dr. Brue, where do you practice and how long have you been practicing? Go ahead and tell us a little bit about that.
hello. So right now I am practicing with Banfield Veterinary Clinic, and I have been practicing for about 8 years now. So out of school
Nice.
for about 8 years.
Nice. And how long were you in school for?
Well, vet school alone was 4 years, but I did complete my bachelor degree too, so a total of eight.
Dang. Do you think that's pretty fast for vet school? Because, like, if we think about nowadays, well, maybe not right nowadays because of everything that's going on with the virus and it's kind of stalling some things out, but how people take out loans, and that's a big factor when it comes to vet school and having to think about that. Do you think that's something that vets think about, or is it that they just kind of get in, they want to get rolling, and they get their 8 years done and they're good? Or do you know anybody else has experienced that?
Yeah, so I think personally, I don't think I thought too much about it as far as how much it would cost.
Yeah.
And so I think, now everyone is a little bit more aware because
Mm-hmm.
it is can be so expensive.
Yeah.
And if you can't pay everything kind of as you go along, the loans accumulate quickly, and you really have those things for a long time. And
Yeah.
so it can get pretty overwhelming
Yeah.
and for a lot of people. And I think that's a pretty similar story with many as far
Yeah.
as they go forward. Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of that gung ho ness. Because I know, like, if we're just really facing and looking at places in the industry, when you want to work in the animal industry, you have a high drive to help. And I think with that barrier of needing the medical grading school, I guess, you have to do your is it undergrad for the before you go to medical school, or what is
Yes.
the
Yeah.
blocks there?
Yeah, so for example, I don't think you necessarily have to complete a bachelor's degree. You just
Okay.
have to go through the courses
Yeah.
that the school requires.
Okay.
However, every school might kind of have their own requirements for that.
Mhm.
I chose the bachelor degree route
Mhm.
with a focus on veterinary medicine. So just taking those required courses.
Nice.
And so that was my undergrad degree. Yep.
Nice. Yeah, so getting back to the student loan thing, like, so now you're a vet. Now you practice veterinary medicine. How do the loans affect your life even though you've met your end goal?
Well,
And you don't have to
so
get, if it's like too much of a personal question, you could let me know. And but I just want it to be like, a reality check for people who are thinking about getting into it. There's that,
yeah,
it's a huge factor. I know it's a huge factor. We had talked about it at one point, so I was just curious if it is still a factor in your life.
yeah, and so it is kind of a big factor as far as budgeting,
Okay.
right? So, I do have to pay a large amount of my loans. However,
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely no way that I will probably ever pay off my loans
Yeah. That's so
until
sad. Yeah.
yeah, and so a lot of us have like what is it like a 25-year plan or something like
Yeah.
that, and we pay the minimum
Hmm.
because honestly, kind of paying the maximum what you should is like a whole paycheck.
Yeah. Wow.
And so it's a lot of money, and
Wow.
so it's just very difficult to keep up with something like that because it's
Mm-hmm.
very high interest rates,
Yeah.
and some people do a really good job.
Mm-hmm.
They budget well. They're very money oriented. Unfortunately, I didn't get that little bug until a little. um, and so yeah, so it was a bit of a shock for me. And so honestly, like if someone is thinking about going into vet medicine,
Mm-hmm.
that is going to be 100% something you have to look at besides just looking at where you want to go.
Nice. Yeah.
And or if you're like, well, where I want to go is expensive, really not taking out like all the loans you need, for example, things like that. So
Yeah.
just really like get your financial advisor
Yeah.
on fast.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of the nitty gritty. I would say that is probably one of the biggest factors of like when I was growing up, everyone was just like, "Oh, you should be a vet. You should be a vet. You love animals and all this stuff." And it's something that it's like, "Oh, I love animals. I should be a vet." And I as you know, when we were working together, I am not very detail oriented when it comes to the like craft of documenting what you need to, as well as I'm just not a good student. I'm just a terrible student when it comes to bookwork. So, and then the last layer on top of that was the cost. I, was really shocked at the cost. And I had worked at the school at the time that we worked together, and I was learning about financial aid and all that stuff. And I think that's how the conversation came up originally for us. But kind of segues into the next part. So like there is a lot of pressure being a vet. That's your part of the industry is the most respected in the dog world. So if a vet tells you something, it is the highest tier of information people take in and apply to whatever's going on in that moment. But that also comes with a huge responsibility for you guys, and I know in your guys' realm of the industry, there's something called burnout. It happens in the training part too, but you guys are getting a much more extreme hit of it, and there I know has been a lot of people who have taken their lives because of the burnout. And I'm not going to say that it's because of the burnout of being a vet, but do you think that pressure correlates? Do you ever feel though like that kind of just really deep despair and it ties to your work? Is that something that you experience?
I would say that yes, I have experienced that.
Mm-hmm.
I would say personally, I do feel lucky that I don't carry depression naturally, though.
Yeah.
And that's something I can't say for everybody.
Yeah.
And so for the veterinary world, the people in the veterinary world, in general, are like super empathetic people, type A personalities.
Yeah.
Which is a very difficult thing to pair sometimes because we want to help so much.
Yeah.
But kind of where education goes, like helping comes in steps sometimes because it's a very information-based process,
Yes,
right? And
yes.
so it kind of really depends on how we feel we accomplish things. And so with those very empathetic people, the job itself can just be a little too much depending on what they're needed to deal with. And so that can raise burnout a ton.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, we're getting brand new students, just kind of going through conversations I've had with other colleagues is really where this is going. But, new graduates are coming out and they're already just like in despair.
Yeah.
They're like, this is not what I thought I would have to do.
And do you think that comes from you or them, or, we're not saying that this is anything that they're actually feeling, but just kind of, hypothetically theorizing. Is it more coming from, or things that you hear coming from, like seeing the animals in despair, or trying to help the people understand why you guys need to do what you need to do and getting a pushback there? Do you sense that?
I think honestly right now at the moment, it's going to be more of, some cases are very difficult. But I would say right now, it's probably more the pushback of kind of finances
Yeah.
for people sometimes.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, basically. Sometimes people can just be real stressed out. Like owners can be real stressed out, and you don't know how to direct your energy sometimes, and they take it out on who's in front of them.
Yeah.
And not necessarily they don't mean that, but it happens, right? And
totally.
That energy is going, for example, from that owner to that veterinarian, and they're absorbing all of that, and it's crushing. And so that's where that happens.
Yeah. And I've seen it happen, and just working alongside you guys in some of those circumstances, and that's kind of the whole point of all this, is how can we all better coexist and understand these realms of our industry so that it's less stressful on them as clients and pet owners and pet lovers and us, because that's a huge thing. And I was thinking about, like you pointed on, there's a lot of steps to getting to a successful resolve of a case, I guess. And, you also touching on the finance piece of that. So when we think about the steps that it takes to get to a solution of a case, and case being when an animal comes in and they have some sort of something wrong, it's identified as a case. And it's just that particular, it could be your dog has an ear infection. That's considered a case. So when we're looking at these steps in the breakdown of that financial barrier, I know right now with everything going on with COVID, it causes a lot of restrictions on pet owners. But maybe if you would just help us better understand why the financial piece is so important. Is it because of the cost of materials that it takes to do your job? It's probably not because you as a veterinarian are a money hungry, individual. That's not why you do this. So is there how, I guess me trying to phrase this question is even though, yes, there is a financial barrier, why is the finances and the diagnostics so important for you to do your job?
Yeah, so, just kind of from the bare bones, a vet hospital does take quite a bit to run. So per doctor, there's a minimum of 2 people helping, up to 3 or 4 sometimes if it's really busy. So you have 4 people helping you, 4 people potentially helping multiple pets.
And those are the vet techs, right? Vet techs or vet assistants. Yeah.
Yep, vet assistants, the receptionist. Oftentimes they're called client service coordinators. And then it takes a lot of knowledge to for those people to go to school as well. So you have to pay them for their knowledge. And that's running all the machines, setting up your surgery suite, running the x-ray machine you have to have, learning how to take care of that critical case. So, and so at any point in time, we have probably 5, 6 things happening at one time.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, so that's kind of where the bare bones of some of the cost is. But then when you kind of get to diagnostics, a lot of those things are just kind of being able to do diagnostics in-house right away. So also the cost of those particular machines that I don't need to send out blood work, and you don't need to wait.
Yeah.
On your results.
Yeah. And diagnostics could be anything from, if your dog has an ear infection, needing to do an ear swab to find out what type of bacteria is in there, right? So you better know how to treat it, right? And when a dog has a lump, when someone comes in with a lump, to find out if it is, just a fatty tumor, right? Is it a fatty tumor situation?
Or a fatty mass. Yeah.
Okay. Or if it is something that needs to be addressed, you need to take a sample of that and either send it out or run it in the house. And there's different levels of the diagnostics and different costs to those depending on how pressing they are. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just, that's one thing I hear that is frustrating on the client's end is, we as humans tend to be very self-centered. I think that's showing a lot more now than ever. But I think it's just a natural thing. We live in our own brains and we operate about our own lives. So of course, everything we do it starts to become thinking about us. And even though we have these pets and we love them, very few people, I think, have a reserve of money for their pet. And if something was to go wrong in the moment, and then when that moment comes that they need vet assistant, then all of a sudden they're hit with this big sticker shock of what it's going to take care of it. And in the person's world, they're like, my dog just like chases a ball. I bought the dog a chucket, and that's like as far as my dog expenses go, like maybe dog food, dog bed, things like that. They're all these like little things that add up over time. But I think very rarely few people think about having a cushion or a budget. How much would you say is a good budget to have? And I know this can be like a very vast application, but just for your basic, like, get the dog seen, get some basic diagnostics, and this could be over a spectrum of things: skin, ears, and getting like flea meds. How much do you think is a reasonable cushion to put away for someone who has a pet?
Yeah, so I would say, honestly, if we're just talking about prevention and you want to make sure you're keeping up with basic health care, I would say like minimum $500 a year. Better cushion would be up to like $1,000.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's per year. And that's vet expense, not necessarily like other like dog food expense, things like that.
Yeah. No, I think that's good.
Yeah. And then for emergency basis, honestly, when that can bring that really high. So depending on what's going on, and say it's something severe, say like, unfortunately, say it's a surgical case, which is kind of the most, acute, like severe thing.
Yeah.
That can raise that budget up to $5,000-$6,000.
Okay.
Like, that's something need to have like kind of on the spot.
Yeah, and that is something, working with you guys, that I am very adamant about. People whose dogs or puppies chew on things, is talking to them about what a foreign body surgery costs. And if your dog eats something and it cannot come out, what may happen and what to be prepared for. And it kind of instills that like we need to get the chewing thing under control, which, kind of segues me into the next part of, like, you guys as vets go through school, you learn about medical stuff. How much do you learn about training and behavior, and breed and development of life as far as a dog's behavior? Do you learn any of that? Do you learn a little bit of that? Like, where do you get, do you just get any of that information in vet school?
Yeah, I think we get a little, and that might be kind of like a class.
Okay.
Wow. And so, or a lot of people just have maybe done, it's going to be very person dependent, because a lot of people do some things themselves at home and they're just already knowledgeable.
That's good. Yeah.
And so I definitely would say I was not that knowledgeable, or didn't have like a ton of experience. So I had to kind of learn as I went and ask for help.
Yeah.
As far as things go, I mean, of course, there's resources I can read, and that's helpful. But
yeah. So when you started working and practicing, were you kind of taken back at how scared dogs were of going to the vet, or how scared any animal was of going to the vet?
Yeah, I mean, I guess not. I guess it's a new thing for them, and I could see definitely why it would be a little daunting for any dog that's not used to traveling. So say, for example, my first job before Banfield was kind of a countryside, and so a lot of has just stayed home and their yard was their home.
Mm-hmm.
Traveling was scary, right? The car wasn't really a thing. And so that is just stressful in itself.
Yeah.
Riding in a car, going somewhere new, seeing someone new you don't know.
Yeah.
So it's stressful, and it's been good to kind of learn how to help pets adapt to that if they do have those stressors.
Yeah, so I know that you had been kind of, or I just don't know how your journey has come with it, but Fear Free, that is is it a program, or is it like information that you guys get as vets about how to help pets be a little bit less fearful of the vet?
Yeah, and so it is a certification you can get, and some hospitals get like a certification for their whole hospital. So that means like every person in their hospital, usually, or at least like most, have to have that certification.
Wow, that's awesome.
And then they fill out this emotional report card, so that way they can assess how the pet's doing at every visit.
Nice.
Things like that. And so yes, it's a certificate you can get.
Awesome. That's so cool. I'm so glad. I just remember when I walked into the hospital and the air was tense, man. It was tense when I came on, and I just remember Shayla coming on after me. Shayla was a vet tech that we worked with. She had come up from California. I was living in Oregon at the time where Dr. Brue works, and Shayla came in and she looked at me and she was just like, "Is it always like this in here?" And I was just like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Oh, we got to change that." And I was like, "Yeah, let's change it." And we just kind of like joined forces with one another on just how to be a little better. And it got there over time. Thank God for Sean, our practice manager, for managing all of us and getting us on a good path. But also, so touching on behavior and the vet field, there's so much I could go into that, obviously, with me being a trainer. But the biggest thing I guess I want to ask is, like, do you see anything that could be prevented in your field from training? Like, there's the big ones, like a dog was hit by a car because, he wouldn't come back. And then we talked about the foreign body surgery and like, but is there anything else that you think that just could be prevented if we just got to these owners a little faster, or maybe like a different way that we could get them this knowledge to understand prevention?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is around like socialization, as far as and I'm just kind of talking about those pets that have real trouble, like coming to the vet. And there's some that are great. They're like, they don't care. They don't have a care in the world. They love everybody. But the ones who are mostly stressed, I feel like, their stressors are kind of around meeting new people. There are certain things, like maybe it's not meeting new people. Maybe it's being like handled in a certain spot. Okay. A lot of times it's like the nails, right? Like a lot of stress around trimming nails, a lot of stress around the rear end. Of course, there's sensitive areas, but that can be a biggie.
And that was one thing that I found really positive. I used to work for a big box, like pet store, I guess we would call them, a big industry pet store. And one of the things in our curriculum was handling. And it was brilliant because we had all these people who came in with their puppies and we did puppy training. And the second class was always handling. First thing we talked to them about was communication, and then we'd sit down and have our handling class. And I'd always run them through, like, what's inside your dog's ears, and they'd look inside, and some dogs would squirm, and some dogs would like bite the hand, and I'd walk them through each step of the way. And it was something I really, really loved because it did come after working with you guys and seeing how stressful those little things were that we just, as pet owners, don't think to check every day. And then when it's poked and prodded, there's growling, there's biting, and something I hear all the time as a trainer is they've never done that before. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, they're doing it now, and it's simply communicating they're uncomfortable, so just kind of easing them into that comfort and knowing how to navigate. So yeah, I'm glad you touched on the socialization piece too. So when talking about like socialization to the vet, and I think a lot of people don't truly understand what socialization is. So I just kind of want to touch on that for a second. Socialization for a lot of people, when they get a dog, means that their dog plays with other dogs. When really, socialization in the industry or just for pets in general means that your dog can be around a spectrum of things, such as like a bus, or they can hear a baby cry, or, you know, a firework goes off. Like, those are scary things. Those are kind of weird sounds when we think about the perspective of the dog. But socialization is the dog being able to cope with those sounds, sensations, and settings. I would put it. And there's a big thing that I have been frustrated at, like with a trainer, and that is when I get the client whose dog is under socialized, meaning it is afraid of things, it doesn't know what things are, and it's about 6-7 months, and I ask them, you know, like what's been going on, and they talk about how they didn't start to bring the dog places until after all the vaccines were had, which is about 4 months, right? Four months is like when vaccines.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. So looking at the learning periods of dogs, those windows, the window right below 4 months when the dog is like a toddler, it's, you know, those are some really, really impressionable and good times, because at that point the puppy is still like, welcome to new things. It's more curious. It's more like easygoing, I guess I would say, before puberty kind of starts to generate and they get a little more apprehensive about stuff. But what is the reality when it comes to the vaccines and hitting that like last vaccine? Like how dangerous is it really for a puppy if it's had about 2 shots and maybe they want to like take it to a park or something and get it around some things to get it exposed to get a little bit more balanced?
Yeah. And so I don't know if I play it too safe or not,
Yeah.
but maybe there's never a too safe. But so the thing is, with those initial vaccines, part of that vaccine is the parvo. So we generalize it as the distemper vaccine, but parvo is part of that combination.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, that particular piece is what we typically will see in a dog, puppy or unvaccinated adult, if they are going to show signs of something. And that particular disease can get tracked easily.
Yeah.
Like someone just has to walk through an infected yard and then tromp it around anywhere.
Is it airborne or is it contact?
Contact. So typically through the grass.
Okay.
Is where, you know, you kind of like when you kind of track down the history, and you're like, okay, where did you go? Like, things like that. And so I generally will say, like, okay, no public spaces.
Okay.
Where a lot of dogs could go, a lot of people walk.
Okay.
And so that's kind of where, because I work in an area, a lot of people don't have vehicles, they don't have yards, it's apartment living, right? And so their escape is the dog park. Or whatever grassy area they can go. And so I have to kind of be like, I'm uncomfortable with that.
Yeah. Okay.
But the nice thing kind of in my area too, what I really like is there is a place that they have socialization with puppies with the same vaccine status.
Nice.
And so say they're just like they just got their two vaccines, but they really need like maybe one or two more.
Yeah.
And they can go play amongst their peers, so to speak,
Nice.
in a safe space. It's an indoor place.
Nice.
But,
and still there's
yeah.
some risk to that as well, I'm sure, right? Like if we really don't know where the other puppies have been and things like that. But I mean, in the world of dogs, there is always risk, no matter what you do, no matter how much you try to prevent, right?
Right.
That's awesome. I love that, though. There's nothing better than a bunch of bouncy puppies and just being goofy. Oh, man, that just makes me so happy to think about. Awesome. And then just kind of trailing on that. So like, we got let's say I just got my puppy, right? I got my puppy, I got my parvo vaccine, it's complete. And now I'm waiting on rabies. Mm-hmm. What is the intensity that I wait on that, or where do I bring my dog when I'm waiting on that? What's going on with that?
Yeah. So that one I think is going to be kind of dependent on what you want to do. So if you are needing to like board your pet, you're going to have that.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're thinking about now, walking in the woods or something like that, I would be careful, because you never know like what your dog's going to see that you're not going to,
Mm-hmm.
And then how they're going to take off and what like ruckus may happen.
Yeah.
And so it's always good to like be safe there. It's always good to be safe if, for example, they get in a quarrel with another dog, things like that. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's
Good
a very
point.
important one to have. It is usually kind of one of the later ones I
Yeah.
do, like you said, around 16 weeks, but
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a biggie in life.
Oh yeah, I know. And it is like, always have, one thing I always tell people is like, always have your rabies paper on you. I know there's a lot that's electronic, but it's kind of like insurance with dogs, in the world of dogs, like having a vaccine paperwork. Cause again, you touched on it perfectly. Like, if you want to have your dog off leash, like that's on you, but just be prepared. There may be some other dogs on leashes that don't like that. And if your dog approaches and then something happens to your dog, I think you just need to be prepared to take them to the vet and have the proper paperwork. And again, it is all being prepared. So like the steps of being a responsible pet owner, and people don't think about this stuff. So like having the budget for emergencies, having the paperwork so that you can efficiently move through an emergency process if you were to need to. I always have mine for my dog in my glove box in my car, and I also have a file in my phone on my email. I always know where it's at. And so that's really good on the rabies part. So just if someone wanted to just go for a walk with their puppy, would you say that's like safe as long as they're aware of their surroundings? Like I'm talking on a sidewalk. I know you live in Oregon, so it's a much different setting. I'm down here in LA where it's a concrete jungle. And we can just kind of walk around the block and there's no woods or deer or anything like that. Well, there are, but not where I'm at.
And so, because people are like, well, what do I do? And I'm like, well, make good decisions, basically, where you're walking.
Good.
Typically, the sidewalk should be fairly safe, but you just got to remember kind of if you decide to do, explore a little more, there is still chance you could get infected with something despite your vaccines,
Yeah.
So hopefully, those vaccines are made to lessen the signs you see or the infection basically, but it's not like a bulletproof thing that you can't like not 100% get that disease, because their immune system is still very immature at that point.
And that's like a good point, just making smart decisions. And I think that's kind of the big thing with doing this is in our minds, between you and me, we've done this, we've seen some, to put it bluntly, some shit. And when we think about dogs running around off leash and things like that, it kind of makes our hair stand up on end. But the average pet owner is a little naive to what real danger could come from that if not properly trained, or they are not properly advised about what's going on in the real world and the risk that could come from, certain decisions with their dog. And again, like you were talking about, when there's expectations pretty much from clients as to how something's going to go, and then it doesn't go their way, whether it be like, you think their dog has an ear infection and they think you're just going to give them medicine, but the piece that's missing is you need to find out what type of infection it is, and then there's an extra cost, and that misunderstanding in that moment is what's dangerous for us. And I think we can kind of come together and help people understand like those steps, and where it's going to make a little bit more sense for them to realize the risk and what it's going to cost is, all part of this. But I just kind of want to touch on one last thing, and that is kind of just it. It's what do you wish the general public knew about what it's like to be a vet?
I think what I would just kind of like everyone to know would just be like, we definitely, do our best, but we are just human beings as well, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's really just, trying to still do our best to communicate together, because like you kind of touched on, we, it really involves so in the end, it's really around the pet. And then we have to work together to try to get the history. Mm-hmm. So it's on the owner to give us a good history. Mm-hmm. It's difficult to work situations out, just kind of, trying to pull things out of somebody. Trying to think. And so it's really like being prepared, right? So the owner's got to be prepared, and then we can give the information to them, and we can figure out a plan.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and so I think that's where there's a lot of things that get kind of rushed, or like you said, they're not understood. Like, why is this, for example, it's a more complicated case. Mm-hmm. Like, why do I have to do all these steps? And then you kind of educate, well, I need these steps to kind of help you figure out what's going on with your pet. Mm-hmm. Because like we mentioned earlier, it's very information based. And so a lot of things can't happen quickly. Yeah. And so sometimes people are very eager to figure things out. And so just, I think understanding the patience around the time medicine takes, the time some care is involved in their pet, because things aren't always quick as far as healing goes. But in general, just knowing that, we are definitely trying to take strides to care for your pet the best way we can. Yeah. And go from there. And so I think sometimes, just thinking kind of, not trying to think negative, but a lot of the stress that comes out of vet medicine is basically people trying to rush those steps, and it takes a turn for the worst. For
sure. And so what are kind of just educating everybody, what are the best things to have prepared for your vet if you're in that situation? Like, what are the most common questions you ask someone when getting a history? Like, let's say, like, how long it's been going on for, like, what happened? Like, what are the things that someone can expect to try and answer when walking in with a general case?
Yeah, so say you're new to that veterinary practice. Mm-hmm. So you're going to get asked, are you up to date on your vaccines?
Okay.
And so having that history, like you said, prepared is always good. What's your diet? Has there been a change in food? Are you on heartworm or flea prevention? Has there been any travel? Has there been any changes at home? Let's see.
Those are all good. No, those are all excellent. Yeah. Absolutely excellent too. So good. Yeah, I think that's a really good piece of information for people to have is, what they can expect walking into a vet. Because I think it's people in their minds have and I see it all the time with training. People are just like, my dog barks. Why do they bark? And I'm like, because you have a dog. Because it's a dog. But then, looking deeper into that, then we look at, the steps I take are like, is it coming from fear? Is it coming from being assertive? Is it, we look at the situation, like the situation is what makes everything different. But, when people come up and they're just like, why does my dog bark? I'm like, because it's a dog. And I just kind of throw it back at them. Like, let's really think about this. But again, I want this to be an educational piece for us professionals too. We need to take a step back and realize these people aren't in our industry. They don't understand what we move through in a day, and they don't understand, or we don't understand what they move through. Some of them might be lawyers. Some of them might be, people where urgency is what their life revolves around. And so I wanted to touch on that piece, but that's really good info, is what info to have when you go into a vet with your pet. And then lastly, do you get any training questions? People asking you how to train their dog?
Yes. So oftentimes, I think the biggest question is, especially when they're young, is potty training. Mm-hmm. What is the best way to potty train my pet? Mm-hmm. So let's see. Do you want me to just go through multiple questions?
Yeah, a few. And then also like what you would tell them, or if you want me to, recommend, so that we can just kind of collab and like, here's these questions that I get all the time as a vet. What do I say?
That might be probably is better. But so for example, like we kind of touched on it a little bit, like how do I socialize my puppy, when they're not vaccinated. I think people are a little more educated about that too, which is I'm glad for. And then like how do I help this separation anxiety is a big one.
Are you seeing just curious question, are you seeing a lot more of that lately? Are you hearing cases of like, COVID happened and then some people started to go back to work, so then it got really bad? Are you hearing any of that?
I haven't heard too much about it, luckily.
Yeah.
I think kind of, fortunately for my pet owners right now, most of them are still at home.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so LA just hit the ground running, and
I'll hear that.
Yeah. So they just pulled the reins back on us again. So we'll see what happens here. But they let us loose, and we messed it up. And I mean, I don't know what's to come of all this, but I am hearing a lot of cases of, there was a big rescue wave when COVID hit. And I guess that's something you could touch on as well, as are you seeing new pet owners? And I'm hearing for the pets who got adopted, they came into a home where they only knew where people were around. They only knew that. They're like, this is my new life, people are around all the time. And people who got the dogs were just like, this is cool, I just hang out with my dog all the time. So then when they leave, there's no structure for the dog. There's no, like, the dog doesn't know what to do when it's in a crate. Like, there's no understanding there. So I'm seeing the separation anxiety, like, hike with the COVID situation. It's really interesting. But go ahead and ask a few more, and I'll answer them. And then do you have specific questions for me? I know I asked you to have some questions.
Well, honestly, I was like, I want to kind of hear your opinion on this separation anxiety. And
it's
then
deep.
Potty training.
It's a deep one.
What I say, how well I do.
Yeah. So, no, I like this. It's like and that's the whole point again of this, is to educate the people and to educate ourselves that like we all play a different role in our industry. And I have started to think about it like cars. If you get a crack in your windshield, you're not going to go to a tire shop. If I have a behavior problem, I'm not going to go to my veterinarian. I may go to a behaviorist if the trainer segues them to that, because that's a part of the behavior and it's a part of the psychology of the dog. Whereas, so I've been thinking about it a lot like that, as well as in training and in the veterinary field. Then you have your own little segments. You got your, like, if we're going back to the car thing, you got your car shops that work on VWs, and then you got your car shops that work on your Aston Martins, or I shouldn't talk about cars because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But then in the vet field, you have people who work with just bones and restructure. And then you have you do general practice, right? Like general practice for the most part. And then you have people who do eyes. And I know there's technical terms for that, but
they specialize.
Mm-hmm.
They specialize, yep.
Exactly. And the same goes for the training world. So like I did a lot of foundation work. Foundation work is like your basic puppy learning. It's a lot of positive reinforcement. And so over the past few years now, I've really been channeling into something called behavior modification, which is the dogs with problems. It's the dogs with some serious problems. And I do, basic leash walking. That's some of the main thing that I do. But those are two different realms of training. There's two different roles that trainers play in the industry. There's a couple different roles, but again, I'm going off on a tangent. You could see why I wanted to talk to everybody about dogs. So yeah, I'll touch on the separation anxiety and the potty training. The separation anxiety thing is big for me. There's a point where I want to know when to call it, when the dog may need medication. So for me, that looks like the dog so stressed that it's busting out of windows. It's busting out of their crate. It's going through like glass and things like that. That is when I'm going to refer to a behaviorist. And those are extreme cases of it. When it comes to the health of the dog, there's not much obedience. There is, but you may need something to take the edge off if it's that extreme, and that's when I refer out. But when someone comes to me and they're like, my dog has separation anxiety when I leave. They cry and they moan and they whine and what do I do? Or they howl. Then I'll say, all right, let's break this down. But first, let me see your phone. And they're kind of like, what? And I just have them hand me my phone or their phone, and I put it in a drawer, and I close the drawer, and I start to talk to them. And as I'm talking to them, I can see clearly this person is preoccupied with the phone. They keep looking back at the drawer, and they keep kind of just like having this twitching, and they're nodding, but they're not really all there. And at one point I stop talking, and I'm just like, you're worried about your phone, huh? And they're just like, oh yeah, I hate this. And I ask them how do you feel? And they're just like, oh, I hate it. I don't know. It feels weird. Sometimes I'll even go as far as take them and walk them around the facility I work in, and they don't have their phone, and you see real distress there. And I point out to them how important their phone is to them. And, this moment of they have this huge connection to it, and they too are displaying signs of separation anxiety. And I point that out to them, and it just, this light bulb goes off, where when it comes to the dog, and when we think about how the dog is supposed to act, we have, again, an expectation in our minds as pet owners. And when it doesn't go according to plan, then suddenly it's annoying. Then suddenly it's a problem. And then suddenly it's I must fix this. But when you think about just the baseline separation anxiety of a dog and their person, the person is your dog's phone. It's the main source of how they communicate to the world. It's the main source of entertainment. And in some ways, it's the only thing they understand, for the most part. So when I really break that down for people in that aspect, and they kind of have that realization of like, oh God, like I just, I never thought of it that way. Again, getting back to like, people are very self-centered. Then I work on basic obedience with them. And we work on like coping. So, they just like they had to kind of have some restraint and cope with their phone being gone. Then we start to teach the dog like, okay, we're just going to go in and out of the room for a little bit. We're going to come back. And maybe we'll give them a busy toy and things like that. Like separation anxiety can be broken down, but it's a dog by dog case. So the real steps for getting into it, I usually like to teach the dog like crate train or give them a spot, give them a task. If you need to leave and the dog is displaying real distress, like howling, barking, things like that, it's because the dog doesn't know what to do when you're gone. It's suddenly just suspended in space. So I'll give them like, work on your crate training, work on your stay, like give them that task, start to build a little bit of independence and the dog being functional in those tasks. And then we work on like busy toys. So like a busy toy is like a Kong, a stuffed Kong. And people will be like, oh, my dog hates the Kong. It's like, yeah, you gotta put stuff in it. Your dog has to be food motivated for the most part. And you can find something that works for them with that. If there's severe crying, then, you look at using tools and things like that. But you really don't want to explore those things unless you have to. So much can be solved by problem solving and understanding your dog first and foremost. So the separation anxiety thing is layered. It goes deep. Like I said, for me, because, and it's an emotional thing for me, I think, because it is just people don't understand and it's causing this rift and it's causing them angst towards their dog when it's not the dog's fault. Just like it's not our fault that we love our phones. Like those things are amazing. I love me some Insta stories, but there's a time and a place where we got to be without it. And we have to have that structure, such as work, such as having an important conversation like we are now. And I think that's important for the person to understand so that they can start to instill that structure for their dog as well. It's not just all of a sudden I learned that I need to not have my phone when having important conversations or needing to pay attention. Like there was a consequence in school, right? If I was using my phone in class, it was taken away. So that's, just my perspective on that. And again, I know it goes deep and I could ramble on that for a while, but I'll go ahead and stop that one there. And we'll look at potty. What's that?
So that was a good example.
Yeah. So I think about this stuff a lot, and I'm just so glad to be doing this because I have somewhere to put it now. So potty training, again, situational. So my first thing with potty training is what is this person's lifestyle and what is their goal with their dog? So when we look at potty pads and we look at crates and we look at all that tools and things for the dog to be successful in potty training, we want it to be also a system that the person is going to be successful at. So you see a lot of like templates and times and this amount of time and this amount of time, and like there are windows that you have to pay attention to, whereas like if the dog is 8 weeks old, you're going to be taking them out almost every hour. Maybe not in the night, but almost every hour during the day. Because when a puppy moves, like things move fast. So as the dog ages, you start to look at, again, structure. So your management plan is huge when it comes to training anything. But potty training is where your management plan can accelerate it. So your management tools when it comes to potty training are either your crate, your playpen, or a safe space that the dog resides at, that they eat, sleep, play, and get, affection. So when you have that space established, then you look at routine. So you look at routine as to like when the dog needs to go in and out. And that, again, is situational. Your staple times are when the dog wakes up. Anytime your puppy wakes up from taking a nap or from sleep, you take them out. And this is a good spot to start doing some clicker training, some marker training. So you take the dog out. If they go, you can mark it, which I'll get into that talk with another trainer. I have another trainer lined up this week, and we're going to talk all about marking behaviors and all that stuff. But for the short term, I'll just give you my little potty training routine. So You mark the behavior and you reward them right there on the spot. Good job, dude. Then when you go back inside, your dog can have like 30 minutes of playtime, you know? And again, it's situational. If you're going to be going off to work, then maybe they got to go back in their safe spot. If you're going to be hanging out the house for a while, maybe it's an hour. You know, you just want to start to gauge when your dog messes up in that window of time as well. So like, let's say the half hour passes and your dog has not gone potty. I tell a lot of my people in training, set an alarm for yourself. Hours can pass for us as humans. Like we can just be sitting and dinking around and hours will pass. But for our puppy, there tends to be trends on when they need to go. So if you set an alarm and you set it for every half hour, every 45 minutes, everybody's got time right now. They're at home, set yourself an alarm. And when it goes off, take them out. See if they go, see if they don't. If they don't go, you can put them back in their safe space where they're less likely to go. Sometimes they will have accidents, but they're least likely to go when they're in a safe space. And yes, that gets layered as well. Sometimes they may cry, and there's applications that you can do to help them with that. But again, that's why you get a trainer. That's why training is important. There's so many steps. But anyway, so I would say potty training broken down super, super minimally. Have a good management spot where somewhere where your puppy can go, where you're feeding them, they're playing and all that stuff. Have a routine around that potty spot. When are they going in and out? And have a system that you can start to identify when your dog is going and when they're not. Then you can start to push those boundaries. So let's say your dog has been in their management spot. You take them out. They go potty. Awesome job. You take them back in. They start to play 2 hours or what have you. And then they go to the bathroom in their house. Just note the time, see what time it is, and maybe next time take them out a little sooner. If they're hitting the mark at every certain amount of time, then you start to push when they're going out. So if you're really looking at potty training, then you can once that half hour alarm goes off, put them back in their management spot, because that's where you're teaching them to hold it. All right. And I could get into like, it's a whole psychology thing there, but just for the people at home, put them back in their management spot and let them hold it for just another half hour, then take them back out. And that's young puppies, but I know it's frustrating potty training, and it's situational. And I definitely recommend anybody listening, like if they're struggling with it, talk to a trainer, because we got a lot to say. We'll work with you. So yeah, and I know that's one of the things I was curious about for you guys is you can see how much and how complex these systems are for us, and you guys don't have a lot of time. Sometimes you just have a 15-minute appointment to vaccinate a puppy, and you get this question. So yeah, how do you break that down in that amount of time? You're not supposed to, and that's why it's important for me to help you guys as well, and just have you guys realize, just like with the separation thing, I wouldn't start to diagnose dogs going through windows, and that's outside of my realm. Someone else in the industry has to take care of that. So when you get that person that's like potty training, blah, blah, and you're like, I don't have time to break this down for you, and it's going to be counterproductive to what you're trying to do, and you may not be successful with it because of that, refer out. Refer to someone who is going to have that time for that conversation for them, and that's what they do. I think that's the important message for the people in the industry for this. But yeah, so those are that. And then the proper socialization, it's a mix of what you and I talked about. It's getting them out there, but being safe and being aware. It's kind of like how you are being with the coronavirus right now, I would say. Well, maybe you're not being very good at it, but then maybe you may not be very good and safe when taking your dog around. And you know what? It's your pet. It's your life. And I'm just here to help educate and assist, but I can't control what anybody does with their dog. So I think with the socialization piece, that's that.
Yeah.
Well, I do have to jet. I got to do an art drop and everything, but Dr. Brue, thank you so much for being a part of this. And I really do want to have you on a little bit more if you'll support it. And if you have any veterinary friends who would like to participate, or they have an interesting sector of your line of work, they do something specialized or anything like that, I would love to talk to them and help people understand what they do and how to interact with them as well. Okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if you especially, if you have Dr. Holmes info, like I want to talk to that guy. I have some unresolved stuff for him, and I'd love to have a chat with him and see where his journey has taken him. And I really, just on a last note, as a trainer, I learned so much in the small amount of time that I worked with alongside you guys doing what you do, and I gained so much respect for it. I hear trainers all the time who are just like, oh, this vet said this, and oh, they're this and they're that, and it's like, you know what? If you haven't been there, you really don't know. And I admire you and I respect you, and I'm so happy we got to have this chat.
It was awesome.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, or to getting it out there. So with that, I am so glad that everybody joined us and watched us nerd out about dogs for a little bit. There were some times where we could definitely tell we got in a trance, but I'm going to let Dr. Brue get some rest, and I'm going to let everybody think about this stuff, and but more importantly, have fun with your dog, be safe, and ask the important questions if you have them. All right? And lastly, if you guys want to encourage Dr. Brue for doing a good job, just, drop that in the comments below, as well as, share this with anybody you think it may be helpful, or who may gain something from it. And that's pretty much anybody who loves their dog. So, have a great day, great night, wherever you are, and I will talk to you soon.